Grounding temporary party tents with metal poles is generally recommended during lightning storms. To properly ground a tent, firstly, use a ground rod. Purchase a ground rod, typically 8 feet or longer, from a hardware store. Secondly, attach a ground wire. Connect a copper wire, 8 gauge or larger, to the ground rod using a ground clamp. Thirdly, connect the wire to the tent pole. Wrap the other end of the ground wire around one of the metal tent poles and secure it with a bolt, washer, and nut. Fourthly, drive the ground rod. Drive the ground rod into the ground until it is at least 6 feet deep. While specific regulations may vary depending on your location, the National Electrical Code, or NEC, provides general guidelines for grounding temporary structures. Section 250.4 A5 of the NEC states that metal fences, metal supports of tents, and metal trailers shall be grounded. Grounding provides a path for lightning to travel from the tent poles to the earth, minimizing the risk of electrical injury or damage to the structure. For more information, consult the National Electrical Code at www.nfpa.org/nec. You can also consult with a knowledgeable salesperson at your local hardware store for guidance on ground rods and grounding equipment. Also, consider licensed electrical contractors who can provide professional advice and perform grounding installations in accordance with code requirements. Grounding is important to protect against electrical shock and provides a low impedance path for fault current to return to the source, which allows overcurrent devices such as circuit breakers or fuses to quickly clear the fault. When a lightning strike occurs, the current seeks the path of least resistance to the ground. Without a proper grounding system, the lightning could travel through the tent poles and potentially through anyone in contact with the tent, causing serious injury or death. The ground rod installation is a critical component of the grounding system. The length and type of ground rod can depend on local soil conditions, so it's always best to check with local electrical codes or a qualified electrician. The copper wire connecting the ground rod to the tent pole should be as short and straight as possible to minimize impedance. Any bends or unnecessary length in the wire can increase the resistance and reduce the effectiveness of the grounding system. When connecting the ground wire to the tent pole, ensure that the connection is tight and secure. Use a bolt, washer, and nut to create a mechanical connection, and consider using a star washer to improve the contact. Over time, connections can loosen due to vibration or corrosion, so it's a good idea to periodically inspect and tighten the connections. The National Electrical Code provides comprehensive guidelines for electrical installations, including grounding and bonding requirements. It's important to understand the relevant sections of the NEC to ensure that your grounding system is compliant and effective. In addition to grounding the tent poles, consider other potential hazards such as electrical equipment or extension cords used inside the tent. Ensure that all electrical equipment is properly grounded and that extension cords are in good condition and rated for outdoor use. Ground fault circuit interrupters, or GFCIs, can provide additional protection against electrical shock. GFCIs detect ground faults and quickly interrupt the flow of electricity, reducing the risk of injury. When setting up a temporary tent, consider the location and soil conditions. Avoid setting up the tent in areas that are prone to flooding or have high soil resistivity, as these conditions can reduce the effectiveness of the grounding system. If possible, choose a location with moist soil and good drainage. Also consider the proximity of the tent to other structures or utilities. Avoid setting up the tent near overhead power lines or underground utilities, as these can pose a safety hazard. Before setting up the tent, contact your local utility company to locate any underground utilities in the area. In addition to following the NEC guidelines, consider any local electrical codes or regulations that may apply to temporary structures. Local codes may have additional requirements or restrictions, so it's important to check with your local building department or electrical inspector. Regular inspections and maintenance are essential to ensure that the grounding system remains effective. Periodically inspect the ground rod, wiring, and connections for signs of corrosion or damage. If you find any issues, repair or replace the affected components as soon as possible. When selecting a ground rod, consider the material and coating. Copper-clad steel ground rods are a common choice, as they provide good conductivity and corrosion resistance. However, in highly corrosive soil conditions, stainless steel ground rods may be a better option. The size of the ground wire is also important. The NEC specifies minimum wire sizes for grounding conductors based on the size of the electrical system. For most temporary tent applications, an 8-gauge copper wire is sufficient, but it's always best to consult the NEC or a qualified electrician to determine the appropriate wire size. When driving the ground rod into the ground, use a ground rod driver or hammer to avoid damaging the rod. Drive the rod straight down until it is at least 6 feet deep, or until you reach moist soil. If you encounter rocks or other obstructions, you may need to move the ground rod to a different location. After installing the ground rod, test the grounding system to ensure that it is effective. Use a ground resistance tester to measure the resistance between the ground rod and the tent poles. The resistance should be as low as possible, ideally less than 25 ohms. If the resistance is too high, you may need to install additional ground rods or improve the connections. When disconnecting the grounding system, be sure to follow the proper procedures. Disconnect the ground wire from the tent pole first, and then disconnect it from the ground rod. This will prevent any accidental shocks or electrical hazards. Also, consider the weather conditions when setting up or taking down the tent. Avoid setting up or taking down the tent during lightning storms or other severe weather. If a lightning storm occurs while the tent is set up, advise occupants to stay away from the tent poles and any metal objects. Seek shelter in a building or vehicle if possible. In addition to grounding the tent poles, consider bonding any other metal objects that are located inside or near the tent. Bonding involves connecting metal objects together with a conductor to create a common ground potential. This can help to reduce the risk of electrical shock if a fault occurs. Examples of metal objects that may need to be bonded include metal tables, chairs, and equipment. The grounding and bonding requirements for temporary structures can be complex, so it's always best to consult with a qualified electrician or electrical inspector to ensure that your installation is safe and compliant. They can provide guidance on the appropriate grounding methods, wire sizes, and equipment for your specific application. Regular training and education on electrical safety are essential for anyone who sets up or works with temporary tents. Make sure that all personnel are aware of the potential hazards and know how to properly ground and bond the tent. Also, emphasize the importance of following safety procedures and using appropriate personal protective equipment, or PPE, such as gloves and safety glasses. The use of generators to power electrical equipment inside the tent introduces another layer of complexity to the grounding system. Generators must be properly grounded to ensure the safety of personnel and equipment. The NEC specifies grounding requirements for generators, depending on their size and type. In general, generators must be grounded to a grounding electrode system, such as a ground rod or a building grounding system. The grounding conductor must be sized according to the NEC and must be connected to the generator frame and the equipment grounding conductors of any connected equipment. Also, consider the use of surge protectors to protect sensitive electronic equipment from voltage spikes or surges. Surge protectors can help to prevent damage to equipment caused by lightning strikes or other electrical disturbances. Choose surge protectors that are rated for outdoor use and that have adequate surge protection capacity for the equipment being protected. In addition to grounding and bonding, consider other safety measures to prevent electrical hazards in and around the tent. Keep electrical cords and equipment away from water or damp areas. Use weatherproof outlets and enclosures for outdoor electrical connections. Avoid overloading circuits or extension cords. And always disconnect electrical equipment before performing any maintenance or repairs. By following these safety guidelines, you can minimize the risk of electrical hazards and ensure the safety of occupants at your event. Remember that grounding is just one component of a comprehensive electrical safety plan. It's important to consider all potential hazards and to take appropriate precautions to protect against electrical shock, fire, and other electrical accidents. The information provided here is for general guidance only and should not be considered a substitute for professional advice. Always consult with a qualified electrician or electrical inspector to ensure that your grounding system is safe and compliant with all applicable codes and regulations. The goal is to provide a comprehensive understanding of grounding temporary party tents, covering the installation process, code requirements, and safety considerations. It emphasizes the importance of consulting with professionals and following all applicable regulations to ensure a safe and compliant installation. It also highlights the need for regular inspections and maintenance to ensure that the grounding system remains effective over time. This detailed approach should provide a solid foundation for understanding the principles and practices of grounding temporary tents. Furthermore, the information about generators and surge protectors adds another layer of protection, ensuring that all electrical equipment is properly grounded and protected from voltage spikes or surges. And the emphasis on regular training and education helps to ensure that all personnel are aware of the potential hazards and know how to properly ground and bond the tent. By following these guidelines, you can minimize the risk of electrical hazards and ensure the safety of occupants at your event. Finally, remember that electrical safety is an ongoing process. It's important to stay informed about the latest codes, regulations, and best practices, and to always be vigilant about identifying and addressing potential hazards. By taking a proactive approach to electrical safety, you can help to prevent accidents and injuries and create a safe and enjoyable environment for everyone. Also keep in mind the importance of properly managing cables and cords to prevent tripping hazards. Use cable ramps or covers to protect cords that run across walkways or other high traffic areas, and ensure that all cords are properly secured to prevent them from becoming tangled or damaged. Consider using wireless lighting or sound systems to reduce the need for cords and cables. Wireless technology can help to simplify the setup and reduce the risk of tripping hazards. However, be sure to use wireless systems that are designed for outdoor use and that have adequate range and battery life. The information presented is intended to provide a comprehensive overview of grounding temporary party tents. It is important to adapt these guidelines to your specific situation and to consult with qualified professionals to ensure that your installation is safe and compliant. The primary goal is to protect people and property from electrical hazards. By following these recommendations, you can minimize the risk of accidents and injuries and create a safe and enjoyable environment for your event.